Insperity presents the Small Business Advocate Show with Jim Blasingame, brought to you by FedEx, CareerBuilder.com, and Palo Alto Software. This is a copyrighted production of Small Business Network, Inc., all rights reserved.
And now, back to the man who thinks Wall Street could learn a thing or two about how business is done on Main Street.
Well, if the good Lord don't like the way I conduct business, let him say something. Let him give me a sign.
Jim Blasingame, the Small Business Advocate.
Welcome back, 34 after the hour. Thank you very much for hanging out with me. My pleasure, as always. Very excited about having a good friend, Richard Hooker, back on the show. Richard is a longtime member of our Brain Trust, the author of Shoestring Venture and senior managing consultant at SDM Advisory Group, and he's one of our top entrepreneurial experts in the Brain Trust. Richard, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. It's great to be here again.
Always a pleasure to have you back on the show. You've been trying really hard to get small business owners to become a little more professional, step by step, inch by inch, toward becoming a little more professional in the way they manage their businesses. What are you working on these days?
Well, what I'm working on now, I've always been the kind of person who there's a lot of money to be made in consulting and in books by cheerleading, by saying, go out there and build a team, build a brand and this or that. And here's your recipe for success. I'm the kind of guy who's always, this part of the recipe is kind of hard. This is how you beat the eggs, because if you do it wrong, it's getting down into the more boring stuff. But it's the stuff that makes or breaks a business. Mm-hmm. And part of the work I've been doing recently is helping businesses do their documentation. And as a student of entrepreneurs and an entrepreneur myself, I've become pretty much determined that people need to sit down and figure out what all their policies and what all their actions are going to be when they become managers. One of the best pieces of advice they never give you is that entrepreneurship, if you want to grow or if you want to make more money than you can do with your own work, that entrepreneurship is really a team sport. And that means that at some point, if you're serious about professionalizing your business, if you're serious about quickly growing your business, at some point as an entrepreneur, you're going to become a manager. Mm-hmm. And most entrepreneurs become entrepreneurs because they don't want to be employees.
Right.
Well, if there's one thing worse than being an employee, it's being a manager.
Right. Well, no, that's right, because so many people, if they actually are good entrepreneurs, they have a hard time transitioning once their business grows. They've sort of found their niche. They found the way they're going to operate. They know what they're good at, and now it's just a matter of replicating and executing, et cetera, like a restaurant, for example. You finally find out what people like, and you're good at delivering it to them. Well, at some point in time, you need to shift from being an entrepreneur to a manager, and that's not easy to do for a lot of folks, is it?
It is not only not easy to do, it's usually where entrepreneurial concerns hit the wall. And they hit the wall in one of two ways. They either fail, or they do what I call the ball bouncing routine, where you grow to a certain number of employees and then you grow back down. Yeah. You grow to a certain number of employees and then you grow back down. And that cycle of coming up to 10 or 12 employees and going back down to 2 or 3, that cycle is literally the life history of many, many entrepreneurs. Making that transition is necessary. Now, you don't have to define your success by building a big company. You may, many years ago, I worked with a very famous market researcher. I won't name him, you know his name. But I remember in our first interview, this is the best market researcher in the world, literally. And I remember our first meeting with him, and he said, well, I have a small company. I'm thinking 50. He said, I have 4 employees. Huh. why do you only have 4 employees? And he said, the thing I hate to do most is manage people. And so I will never do it.
Yeah.
And he was able to make himself wealthy by growing the value of his services.
Mm-hmm.
And so premiums, you're charging a higher
Well, he
premium.
was honest with himself about his management capacity, his management inclination. He was honest with himself about that, wasn't he? And what you're saying, the people who bounce the ball probably aren't being honest with themselves. They're probably not doing a good self-evaluation.
It's very important that you know if you want to do management or don't want to do management. Remember, everything you hate about being an employee is 10 times worse when you're managing employees.
Right.
Sinbad used to have a routine where he said, you think your parents aren't cool? That's because you made them uncool. They were cool before you came around.
Hold on to that thought. I never got away with that with my kids. Richard Hooker and I will be right back. It's 20 till. I'm Jim Blasingame. Stay with me.
Insperity presents the Small Business Advocate Show with Jim Blasingame, brought to you by FedEx, CareerBuilder.com, and Palo Alto Software. This is a copyrighted production of Small Business Network, Inc., intended for the private use of our audience. Except as otherwise provided by copyright law, all other copying, redistribution, or publication without prior written consent is prohibited. All rights reserved.